Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for South and Central Eleuthera.
Happy New Year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me start by not only wishing you a Happy New Year and wishing each and every member of this House a Happy New Year, but also all of my constituents, and in particular those who caused me to be here and gave me the opportunity to participate in what has been a most tumultuous period of reform. In fact, in the 3.5 years of this administration, more reforms have been effected and attempted than in any other 3-year period in our history. For that, I think that the government ought to be commended, and in particular, the Right Honourable Member for Centreville for his leadership during this period. We have attempted things that, quite frankly, most people thought we were crazy to even embark on. Well, you know, even if I'm over here, I'm still on your side. You know, well, we are all together. PLP. We have reformed taxation, and we've introduced effectively, successfully, and with the support of a wide cross-section of the community, value-added tax. The member for Golden Isle is somewhat modest, and he has exceeded even his own meticulous expectations in the collection of VAT. We have reformed gaming, decriminalizing it and bringing a huge section of income earners in our community into the mainstream of the economy, no longer hiding in the shadows, but being able to earn a living in the openness of day. And for that, this government ought to be commended. And while doing that, Mr. Speaker, increasing the revenue stream going into the public treasury. These are no mean feats, Mr. Speaker. We came into office, Mr. Speaker, with a daunting challenge. Having left office in 2007 with a treasury that was bustling over with money, the spendthrift Ingram administration of the Free National Movement, with gay abandon, spent every single penny and more, leaving us in a quagmire of debt. And it is just passing strange that members opposite could even hold their heads up and say some of the things that they say about this administration. Because it really is quite appalling that a member could actually read a report penned in 2010 and have the temerity to attribute the criticism set out in that report to an administration which started its work in 2012. But that is what Long Island did today. And she has the nerve to call other members disingenuous. But let us look at what that report said. And they had a grading, and the Ingram administration did well on the first 3 points, but then they hit a series of Ds. Classification of the budget, D. Extent of unreported government operations. This is not unreported government operations. This is the transparent F&M, D+. Transparency of intergovernmental fiscal relations, D+. Oversight of aggregate fiscal risk from other public sector entities, D+. Mr. Speaker, this is absolutely mind-boggling. Multi-year perspective in fiscal planning, expenditure policy and budgeting, D+. Effectiveness of measures for taxpayer registration and tax assessment, D. Effectiveness in collection of tax payments, D. Predictability in the availability of funds for commitment of expenditures, D+. Now, Mr. Speaker, what that means is they got a D+ for being able to predict what they had to spend. It is no wonder that we ended up in a deficit situation. They simply didn't know what they were doing. Effectiveness of payroll controls, D+. Competition, value for money and controls in procurement, D+. Effectiveness of internal controls of non-salaried expenditure, D+. Effectiveness of internal audit, D+. Timelines and regularity of accounts reconciliation, D+. So, Mr. Speaker, these are troubling in this year. They really match our underperformance and non-performance during the last administration, and ought really to be a warning sign to the public that the people in the FNM cannot be trusted with public funds. It is as simple as that. But our administration could have come in, and we could have taken the position that this is something that the former administration were keen on, and we are going to review and cancel it in the same way that they reviewed and canceled many good things that caused us to be in the buoyant fiscal situation that we were in 2007. Mr. Speaker, we didn't do that. And we were being wise, we were being prudent, we were being committed to improving the lives of the people who sent us to this place. Mr. Speaker, the importance of the IDB's work in the Bahamas over the last 3.5 years has been absolutely stupendous. It has been a wonderful experience working with the likes of Ms. Astrid Winfrey. She has enabled us, empowered us with advice, with access to advice on things such as citizen security, and that was a big subject for the Attorney General's office. It provided us with the wherewithal to make the changes in the office to bring about data collection, to enable the judicial system to receive the level of resources that have been deployed and which bears fruit by the increased effectiveness of prosecutions in the criminal court. And to have an Attorney General in 2016 announcing that conviction rates have actually gone up by 100% is an amazing feat in 3.5 years. Now, much has been said about the Freedom of Information Act that the former administration passed but never brought into force. Mr. Speaker, it wasn't worth the paper it was written on. The act, in essence, sets out what you cannot have access to. We were better off before the act was enacted, if it had come into force. This administration could simply have said, well, we won't do anything with that, we'll leave it alone. But we didn't take that approach, Mr. Speaker. Because of our commitment to transparency and accountability, we have we have drafted extensive amendments to the Freedom of Information Act. They are currently being circulated. They are receiving the widest possible consultation. And members opposite pretend as if it doesn't exist. So, we say that, well, we say that our approach of getting the widest possible support for the new Freedom of Information legislation will augur well for public utilization of information which will then be freely available within an expanded environment, legal environment that currently does not exist. Mr. Speaker, sustainable development requires systemic improvements to the economy, the planning for business growth, for planning the expansion of wealth creation as a means of expanding tax revenues going into the future. One of the notable things that Lee Kuan Yew did for Singapore was to bring a level of focused discipline which enabled his government to transform a backward, economically deplorable community into possibly the second richest country in the fastest growing sector of the world. That's East Asia. It wasn't easy, but he embarked upon that course. He was rigid in his enforcement of honesty in public life. But for the stellar performance of Hong Kong, would have had his jurisdiction probably being the example of anti-corruption jurisdictions in the world. And I say but for Hong Kong because, amazingly, Hong Kong, under the Chinese leadership, has embraced honesty as a grand norm, to use a Kelsenian word. They've adopted anti-corruption measures which far outstrip anything anywhere else on the planet. And they enforce that legislation. Before this House is to embark on a program of legislative reform of our anti-corruption legislation, it would be good if a committee could be formed in the House with a view to participating in the law reform exercise, which would enable the House to actually see the developments that have taken place in other parts of the world, even within the Commonwealth. And I say this House, Mr. Speaker, because while I support the resolution, and I support everything the Cabinet is doing, one of the problems, if not the key problem which has faced this Commonwealth over the last 50 years, has been the marginalization of the House of Assembly in the democratic process that takes place in the Bahamas. And I say that for this reason. Cabinet must have the tools to perform its function. One must accept that. And the capacity building which this money that is being borrowed will help to achieve is important for Cabinet to be able to properly plan what it is doing going forward. It also helps in assessing the persons who work as civil servants for the government. that is absolutely necessary if we are to be as effective as we can be. Now, some of us in this place are conservatives in some areas, left-wingers in others. For instance, Angliston is a traditional Westminster woman when it comes to the issue of ministerial responsibility. And her view is that within the bailiwick that she is in charge of, she and only she is to take the blame for whatever happens in that ministry. That's now regarded elsewhere as an outdated approach. And I say this with the utmost respect for the member of Angliston. She's hardworking, and I have a huge, she's one of the closest women to me, and has been so for going on 30 years.
That's in the Muddy League Park.
Well, no, she is and has been my big sister for many, many years.
Good. Thank you very much.
And so I'm not saying this to be mean-spirited.
No.
In England now, ministers are not required to take the can for inefficient permanent secretaries. They never took the can for corrupt ones. But permanent secretaries and senior civil servants have a role to play in the actual day-to-day workings of government. And it is absolutely important to the functioning of government that they attempt to achieve cost-effectiveness in their ministries and efficiencies, that they create efficiencies for the purpose of maximizing the public good. In England, they are required to go to the Public Accounts Committee and answer questions honestly, bring documents, and to explain advices which they would have given to their ministers. It's impossible in the environment of Westminster, today's Westminster, it is impossible in that environment for I turned it, I better turn it off. It's impossible in that environment, Mr. Speaker, for civil servants to attempt to sabotage government policy, because when they are called before a select committee of the House, they're accountable for their actions. They're accountable for their advice. If they give bad advice, that may be the end of their career. We need now to be moving in that direction with maximum haste. I took a peek at the report which the member for Pinewood had done for him. And it showed that 68% of all students leaving high school had no evidence that they had even been to school for the period during which they were in school. But if you look at the billions of dollars that we have spent, and I said billions, not millions, which we have spent since 1970 on education, one ought to be asking the question, what has happened to that money? Why is it that we have such a huge problem? Any country that ignores 68% of its human capital is headed for disaster. It is no wonder that we have murders taking place in the way that they are. Because educated people do not resort to violence as a first step. And if these people are leaving in that helpless state. They cannot find work. They don't have the wherewithal to even make an application for a job. But that is the environment that we have created. And I say we in a collective sense, and I'm not singling out the FNM, because we are all to blame for it. Which brings me back to the point at hand. For the last 3.5 years, it would appear that the role of Parliament in government, of holding civil servants and other public servants to account for the monies which we have voted for the government to expend on behalf of the public, that role has been bastardized. And it has been substituted with a perennial campaign. It is as if the election in 2012 had never ended. And instead of actually participating in the governance of this country, we have been in a one-upmanship contest which produces no benefit for anyone. And the slinging of insults has never created a job nor enabled a child to read. And we must either stop it or the public will stop us.
I don't know what some pictures were.
You know, in 2015, the Public Accounts Committee in England sat for 9 months and heard 66 different matters and gave 66 written reports. Our Public Accounts Committee is yet to produce a single report in 3.5 years. They're MPs.
Prior government produced 2 reports.
But I'm saying that even if we are part-time MPs,
One extensive, one on the
we are the ones in this House who make rules, we make laws. We vote money. We can change things if we want to change them. So we can't run away from our responsibility. But it seems to me that we are not doing what the public wants us to do. Because the system that we have enables us to get information which we simply have not attempted to get. And you could complain about the Port Authority. My friend on my left is not in the Public Accounts Committee. But there's nothing to stop the Public Accounts Committee from holding a hearing into the Grand Bahama Port Authority and the Hawkesbury Creek Agreement's operation. Because we are funding it through the tax concessions that have been granted. So I'm not, I just wonder when I listen to some people criticizing about the absence of information. If you control the Public Accounts Committee, set it up. But don't complain, oh, I didn't get this and I didn't get that, because you have the power to send for persons and papers. Mr. Speaker, I will close by saying this. Every single member of Parliament has a solemn obligation to promote honesty in public life. Part of that promotion and part of the promotion of accountability is in ensuring that the institutions of Parliament actually function. Some of these committees that were mentioned this morning, I don't know if they've ever met. Now, I know the committee that I chair, things have to be specifically referred to it. A matter of privilege doesn't just arise and be on our plate. But the other committees ought to be working. Why are they not working, Mr. Speaker? And it seems to me that we ought to be asking ourselves serious questions about the funding that is available to the House for the purpose of making sure that the House functions as a House of Assembly should function. We have gone well past the stage where we can merely rely on a cabinet, as erudite as every single member of cabinet is. All hands should be on deck. We have a number of problems which call for national unity. And if we are to achieve that unity, we ought to take matters seriously. And I support the resolution, but I support it in the context of supporting a more vibrant House of Assembly in which members on the backbench are engaged properly in committees and where we are actually expected to do the people's work, because that is why we were sent to the House of Assembly. Thank you very much.